Hello, everyone. Welcome in. I am axisALiVE, and I am joined by Krypto Sloth
That's me.
and
What's up?
Krypto Koolaid.
What's going on?
Both guys fuck with crypto, but they don't spell it the same way.
One of us is correct and one of us is not. We'll let you all decide.
Anyways, gentlemen, we are all joined here today to profess our honor and loyalty to the one crypto, which is
T-shirts.
You both had pretty good answers. Shit.
Yeah.
This is off to a good roll.
Yeah, right. I'm about to build my altar after this one, man.
Oh Lord. that meme thing that what is it? I forget something 5555 did was just pretty hysterical.
What's going on, everybody in the chat? I'm just gonna go through names. FM, what's up, brother? I seen that these guys were posting hours beforehand. Rollins, hello. Obia, welcome in. Goody, AK, Blackwing, X-Ray Vision. I'm pretty sure I streamed with him a few days ago.
Yep.
How you doing, bud? Force of Forgotten Words. Icosa to the moon. Levin, another minus infinite.
Yeah, minus infinity.
Sebalix. What's up, brother? Bobby Haxelrod. Kool-Aid, hoping this means you'll be in the stream. Of course he's going to be in the stream. We locked this in days ago, man. Hours ago. No,
5 minutes ago, we finalized it.
Right. Sith Master, what's up, brother? All right, I think I got everyone. What up, Pierce?
Oh, what's
Red
up,
Squirrel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got a decent viewership already. 40 people in here. Right, welcome in, everyone. We're just gonna, be controversial and flip tables over. So don't mind us.
Money changer style.
Don't mind this train wreck while it happens. But hey, you're not gonna be able to look away.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. But no,
so I think Sloth's gonna, in a minute here, he's gonna take us into like a little bit more of a deeper look on the HSI auction systems and just things that he's coming up with and ideas he's coming up with around hex derivatives.
Yeah.
While I chew on some food. But before we get there, I want to just kind of want to recap what happened in the last few days with X price action and what was going on over in that Twitter space hosted by Gold Key. So there was a lot of talk, obviously about liquidity, hex price movements, targets, and then we offshoot into a little bit of I don't know if tokenomics is the right word, but eventually the conversation came to socialnomics, which was basically like what's all going into the decisions being made about who's all these sacrifice phases and all of these being open-minded toward pulse chain and maximalism versus non-maximalism, and how that all plays into the game theory that we're all partaking in the hex ecosystem, and honestly in true DeFi as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could generally say that the hex ecosystem is its own little community or its own little ecosphere.
Oh, yeah.
Biosphere.
But what I want to see going forward is that you still know where the true value is, but you can still be open to the reality of things. So the reality of things are, just because you have a store of value in the hex T-share doesn't mean that you can't look outside for innovation. At the same time, that outside innovation, even though it may have a tremendous utility, doesn't mean that it's going to hold value the same way that the T-share does. So you need to know where to put your economic energy, store your value. And I think Gifford Ware says this point quite nicely, in that that'll be your main bag is going to be in your yield generating products and that whole suite of tokens that comes along with that. But that the base of that in this true DeFi world, where the most economic energy is going to be poured into, is going to be hex, because it was a first mover in the same way that Bitcoin was the first mover. So I'd like to open that conversation up to you guys and just kind of get your thoughts on that.
No, yeah, 100%. Here, actually, I'll show you this slide really quickly from a really old.
Before we hop on slides, let's just talk about some commonalities that we can easily correlate that to. So if you look at a particular piece of land you can grow a particular crop there, and that's your primary crop. Now, sometimes you need to build supplement crops because you don't want to just eat corn every day or just eat a particular type of commodity. But there is one that will grow more performant in that area, and the T-share will be the highest yield factor that there is. Other protocols that bridge off of it, it's a different connecting part of an engine. And as those engines allow you to move different product or go different places, transfer different things, they can anchor in or anchor off. And going back to ideals and tribalism, I think ideal maximalism is better than just pure maximalism, because as Richard always says, you change your worldview as you evolve with knowledge.
100%. And actually, I've been thinking about this a lot, both in the past, but even more in the present. But this is a slide that I have from a really old stream that I did, kind of about like the way Hex is a store of value. There's like an implicit premise in there that, like, you know, you need to generate value somewhere else and then bring it to Hex. So, like, you know, the idea of Hex being a black hole sucking economic value has always been kind of an analogy that we've used. And so that you can apply that same thing to other crypto ecosystems where we go take our economic energy from Hex, from our job, wherever it is, generate value or capture value somewhere else, and then we bring it back into Hex because it's the place where you can leverage your time for the longest, for like the safest base amount of yield, right? Like, in a way, like Hex staking is like beta, even though because of like how little people know about it, the size of the community, as well as like low liquidity, etc., makes it like alpha relative to the financial market. From a store of value should technically be a beta in that it's your base level of yield that you generate over time. And so if we're able to go out, capture value other places, and then bring it back into Hex, for me, that's like the true dynamic of like what a store of value is. And Hex does that really, really well. And like in the same presentation, I like gave this idea of like bloat versus growth, where like, are we just recycling the same money within our system over and over and over? And that would be like a bloating system where it's just like, we're not actually growing. We're just inflating with like, you know, just recycling the same Hex over and over and over in our stakes. Or are we bringing outside economic energy into our system to like basically put new ETH, new USDC in the liquidity pools? And that's more of a growth state of the system rather than bloating. And so like one is healthy, one is like not. And that's kind of like, you know, yeah, expansion without develop. Yep. And then growth, expansion with development, money entering the ecosystem. And like, you know, there's a reason I put like PulseX and Pulse Chain over here outside of like, you know, the event horizon that like all of these other coins are in, is because these things are really assisting Hex in doing that by like adding extra DeFi utilities within its like its own walled garden to allow for Hex's store of value to really flourish within its own, you know, within an ecosystem built specifically for it.
I completely agree.
Yeah. So yeah, go check out that stream, anybody. I did this like months ago. It's probably one of my first 5-6 streams. I'll throw a link in the chat a little bit later for it. But yeah.
So I think we've actually seen like our first time, like this is the first time this has happened in like 500 plus days where we've seen an actual injection of liquidity that is new money flowing into the asset. Part of that is because we were in this massive 500-day liquidity squeeze where the same traders were trading down the price forever and ever and ever, and just like kind of competing for like marginally better returns until the price was so low that there was nothing left to siphon anymore, or that their bag had deplenished. Their ability to accumulate enough and to see not enough high upside made it so that it was no longer tradable in that way. And so that made this huge giant falling wedge. Effectively, it was like a triangle formation here where the liquidity pools went from like 70 to 80 million dollars of USDC liquidity in here down all the way down to like which it bottomed out somewhere down here, like around just a couple $1,000,000. And this is the total TVL locked on all Hex pairs, but just for like rough numbers, I think we sat like roughly around like 50 million USDC at the peak, or like somewhere on the way up the peak. And at that point, I'm pretty sure there was like roughly $550 million traded in like a 40-day period or 30-day period. And that's when you saw that huge run up on the Pulse Chain hype. But anyway, so then what that ended up creating was this cascade of traders just trading amongst themselves, and no new money was coming in during this entire time frame. But now we've most just recently broken out, tested that as support, and now bounced up on that most recent explosive move in Hex.
Do you think a lot of that is going to be like actual physical people trading, or a good chunk of that is our bots basically making a waved based system or like a momentum based system that then they're trading through that, but because of the cyclical manner of our bots moving, it's
whether it was
equalizing
humans,
what their mentality is going to be.
whether it was humans or our bots, the point was that they were recycling the same money in between the same people's hands over and over and over, basically.
Mhm.
So now that cycle's complete and that the bottom is in, that now you're going to see the new money start to come in, and now the ARB bots or humans can work to the upside now, because that's more of the trajectory of that supply demand equation. So if I pull up the Hex chart and I give you the buys versus sells, look at how, even though there has been $6 million of sell volume and $3.5 million of buy volume, there's been 545 buys to 360 sells. And the price only retraced back to that key level of the 0.236 fib level, which is what we need to hold basically above that. Basically, it's anywhere between 3.2 and 3.5 cents is where we want to see the price sustain for about 2 to 3 weeks. And then we can make another stab at taking out this upper downtrend resistance here than white.
So you could sit or like let's speak about that wick up, because basically what happened, and you speak better about this, is that it went off the floor of the liquidity because people ripped out their liquidity and had it in a different phase. Then as the momentum was going, you get that shooting star where it shot up to what, 5 cents or 5.5 cents, and then from there,
dig into that for sure.
Yeah.
So let me go pull up the Hex on the liquidity pools.
Yeah.
And and to show you what I saw the other day. So right now you can see on the left here, I have it highlighted. There's $86 million in the Hex USDC pair. And at the peak, when the market price peaked at around 5 cents, which would have looked like this up here, it was a 208% gain off the bottom down here, where all this capitulation wicks, just for some perspective. And so then 1 or 2 accounts came in and sold like $3-4 million worth. Extracted out some ROI. I think $150,000 was extracted out here, but they pulled out all the money that they used to pump it up here, plus the gain. And so the net is that the price is going to come back down and test these moving averages, and that what you want to see is price get supported inside of these moving averages and start to regain bullish momentum on that increased buy pressure that you're seeing here on the 540 buys to 350 sells. So that, as long as that ratio maintains, it's going to slip harder and harder to the upside. So how do we know that? Well, there's 86 million Hex right now in here, and that's what was put right back into the pools when those guys sold. But the USD value got up to like roughly 5 million sitting in there. So now you're sitting at 3.4 or 3.24 million bucks of USDC sitting in there now. But when at the peak, this wasn't 86 million Hex. It was actually 18 million Hex. So it was getting very, very low. And I think it actually bottomed somewhere around, I think it was roughly like 5 or 6 million Hex at one point was in there. Like, it was crazy. So then like one major sell brought it back up to like 18 to 25 million Hex right away, right?
Yeah.
But when you get the numbers that low, when there's true demand and FOMO that comes into the market, that's when those really low numbers get scary, because in liquidity terms, the price was all the way out here on the edge. And if there would have been real FOMO there, the price could have literally went vertical to any price as long as the buys just kept coming in. It wouldn't have taken a lot of dollars to keep pushing it up, so long as some big seller didn't come in and just push it right back down.
Yeah. And I think that you bring up a good point there, where like it's like you need that, you know, reflexive FOMO to be able to push it towards that low, that high slippage range. Because, like, you know, a lot of times when we're analyzing liquidity versus like the price, we see low liquidity as a potential place for price to move, and high liquidity as like a place where either there's support or resistance, because there's so much money sitting in there to, like, you know, people need to eat through to move it past it. But low liquidity areas can also act like as places of resistance or support, in that, you know, larger players won't be buying or selling in those areas because they're experiencing so much slippage, right? So it's just another area where it may taper off, you know, market buys or market sells, but it's that extra like FOMO of maybe people with like $500 to $1,000 who aren't experiencing that same amount of slippage in those low level range that will actually get it to push it out towards it and then experience that really volatile price in the low liquidity ranges.
Yep, I'll agree with that. If you think about maybe it's not the right analogy, but if you're a semi truck going over a hill and you're moving up, you have that resistance till you get to the top. And once you get to the top, you get that sideways action. When you go down, not only do you have the weight of going down the mountain, but you have the weight behind you, which creates that momentum that drags you further. It's when someone else manipulates that or moves the liquidity around that the road inherently changes. And that's why rimshot is so fast.
Yep. And so here you can see on this chart, thanks to AMIBOP for creating this this tool. It's super useful. But I'm going to draw the bands here to where there's it almost looks like the middle finger. But basically, but it's basically the way to think about this is, okay, here's the price right now. It's sitting at 3.8 cents, right? Well, up in here, the price is harder to move because there's all of this liquidity here. So like to move the price up here is going to take more economic energy to get it through that resistance level than it would per se. Like if the price falls to here, well, then it can fall faster and faster to the downside, but it can also come right back. The same thing applies out here, where if the price, let's say like 10 million bucks comes in here, pushes the price right up to here, it bull flags, and then like let's see some FOMO come in here, then this can just go vertical. The issue that we're having right now, and it's not really an issue, it's just a fact of the bear market and the coming out of the bear market, is these guys providing liquidity don't know where to put their stuff, and they don't want to lose HEX and they don't want to lose USDC, so we're stuck inside of this range. What this is going to do is it's going to create this triangle formation, and we're going to see some sort of either a move higher or a move lower, and effectively either way the bottom's already been set, because what's going to end up happening is, I mean, this is opinion, I guess. I can't really say with 100% fact that I mean, I think the bottom's in, but that's just my opinion. But the more you get down here into these ranges, somebody's going to come in and take the chance to buy because they know that it's an opportunity. And it's not just one person. There's a lot of people that saw this move and know that the heat is on now. Like we literally recovered this much area. So like the thinking here is that when you do finally get above this level, that's about where you're targeting, which is about 10.5, 11, 12 cents. So basically the way I see this playing out is we're setting up for a pattern, maybe something like this where you play inside of a triangle. And then let's say we come back, we test here, we split down, we come back up, we start moving up again to the highs, we get rejected off there. Then we get up to here, and now it starts getting scary because let's say somebody dumps 150 million, but it gets right bought back, just like what happened back here, you know, because it's still cheap. And then you start to play with this band. Well, these guys that have liquidity down in here are going to be forced to move it. That's not even considering the fact that if Pulse Chain V3 was to be announced, do people want to pull their liquidity so they can have more stuff over there potentially? Are they scared of a potential full release where, you know, they have stuff in a liquidity pool, and then Pulse Chain launches with no bridge, and now they're like, oh shit, I have this money locked away in this contract and I don't have a front end to use. So then maybe people are scared of that. I don't know. But the point is, right now things look good, and this is just a clean, basic retest of these levels. You want to see 3.5 hold. If that level doesn't hold, you want to see 3.2 hold. So, and I anticipate that there are buyers there because of this very fact here, which is more buyers than sellers.
Yep. And so all of these big sales, you know, are, you know, long-term bullish because we're redistributing all of those funds amongst a larger pool of people. So each individual actor, as we go up, is going to have less and less, you know, dumping power, which is good.
Well, I think we still, even as a community and overall as a crypto whole, people still only value things in price. And there's nothing wrong with that because we haven't seen the use case for utility being bound in a circular digital world. Besides, if you look at cell phones and how back in the day, you know, I've said a million times, we had libraries, we had payphones, we had pagers, and now that just doesn't exist. Now, the way that we're moving so fast, we still only look at price because we only understand price. Eventually, when you have actors like if the God Whale keeps rolling and smashing his 45-day stakes, the T-share rate will FOMO more than the price rate, which will then run the price. But people won't understand all those things together. They just look at the car in front of them, and that's all they can see, unfortunately.
So there's another indicator that came in, and this is a huge shout out to Crispy Man for building me this tool. This is basically the what it is it's the volatility on different time frames. So what I have here is like a monthly volatility. And what you'll notice is we held this key level here of 1 for the entire history of Hex's volatility until the point in the price here where price went flat between September of 2022 till October of 2022. It was the 20th actually of each month. And then Godwell pumped the price up from, I think it was like 3.1 cents all the way up to 5 cents. That period in there where price went flat was the most flat and boring and stable coin type price movement that Hex has ever seen in its history. That marked the bottom in the sense that the historical volatility was at all-time lows. And it's a level that it's never visited. And look at how it reacted off that level when Godwell pumped the price. Godwell set the bottom here, even though he became exit liquidity for the capitulators that capitulated into 1.7 cents. He still set the bottom in the form of the volatility because he did a liquidity injection, which is it's an enticement to say, hey, you guys, get out of the system. Here's some money for you. You can sell it off at 1 cent, 2 cent. No big deal to me. We want you out at those levels so you can't hurt the chart anymore. And then you made a higher low on the volatility, and now it's quickly regained back above that 1 level. And now we're way back up here into the volatility zone, which is good because that's what forces market makers to shift their liquidity around and start thinking differently about sentiment.
Do you think that those Godwell buys, he had that intention you said, or are you just like interpreting that based on the effects of his actions? Just curious.
My opinion on Godwell pumping the price there.
Well, like, so you said that like him injecting that exit liquidity for other people, you interpreted that as like him saying, hey, if you guys want out, here's the money for you to get out.
Yeah,
you
he's
think
trying
that was
to
an
set
actual
the bottom.
Yeah,
I think it was
you think that was
intentional. He might not have known how greedy they were and how much they wanted to extract, but he needed some sort of because the market was trying to set a bottom there, so he tried to make a pump off that level to create a bottom, and whether he knew it up front or not, he did create a bottom by the very scenario that I just described.
Gotcha. Okay, that's a cool way to
It's
think
like
about
fishing
it.
and changing your bait, right? If you're changing your bait, you're looking to hunt a different fish. Injecting liquidity is necessary to chum the water in a particular measure, just like if you're looking at ETH Fair or ETHW and all the rest of that. If you're not putting liquidity in to play that market, you're not actually going to get that buy point because everyone else has the same metric weight of what they had before the fork. They don't have any extra fish that they're coming in to do something with.
I mean, yeah, the analogy of throwing chum in the water. I like that one. I like that. That makes sense.
Yeah, so that's cool, right?
Thank you,
Crispy Man, for that. And you can, maybe this is a different way to look at it. Look on a 7-day and look at how parabolic that was. Right. So, same concept. Now you're at the same level as you were back here, which was when we saw that massive sell-off of 7 cents from the big breakdown here in May.
Yeah.
I think it was like mid-July. No, that was all the way in August that happened. So this was like a good, I want to say 30 days of uptrend. Let's go back and see here. Okay, no, that was 2 months of up, man, off that bottom. Yeah, that's very interesting. So we're basically back at that level of volatility that we saw here in the chart, right here, where the thing was like, see what the way you measure volatility is the frequency of it. So the reason why that chart goes up or down is not because of this big move here or this big move here necessarily, but because there's lots of big moves happening all at once, right? The more this goes like this, the more the volatility will go up on that little graph. So basically what you want to see is that happen, because then what it's showing you is that it's opportunity for both buyers and sellers to regain interest in the market. And that was the whole point, was that we needed to create interest in the market again.
I like that.
We got some questions coming in here. Somebody wants to see some moon math.
Oh Lord.
But we'll do that in a little bit. Maybe we'll save that toward the end. Here's a comment. It's hilarious to me how many hex holders sell off after a whale dumps and murders the price. Like, hey, dude, already murdered the price. You selling now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
What's
how it
that?
goes.
Is that large dumping? It just creates uncertainty. You're really like, shit, this might go lower. Let me get out now, kind of thing.
It's a
That's just
psychological game
psychology.
of chess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when I use the term game theory, it's basically mechanics, or people like to call tokenomics, or all the rest of that, and that divided by the system design and that time social consensus. The social consensus is where you get the FOMO and the fear of all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And usually they have that because they didn't understand the underlying mechanics and or life stuff. I mean, we all know that life stuff happens, but there is that.
Yeah. There's people that are have to sell because the price. Let's say you bought in here thinking you were going to 10, and you didn't get it right away, but you needed the money by Friday. Well, you're gonna have to sell then, right? It's forced selling.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: is like that trader cycle is almost over, and so if there's more upside now than there is downside, I guess, in time.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
The risk is to the upside, not the downside, which you've been saying for a while now.
Been saying for a while. Yep. And hi, Sandy Beach. Nice to see you.
Hey, Sandy.
Sandy.
That's a good point. You guys bring up that I was listening to Tangent Space and Twitter Space today a little bit, and he brought up a good point where it's like, financial freedom isn't like a static thing; it's dynamic. Where like if the thing that gave you financial freedom is down 97%, you may not have that financial freedom anymore. And that's what we're talking about with life circumstances where people might need to sell, where previously maybe they didn't, but now that we're down 97%, say you got your income solely from this one asset now, you're forced to sell bottoms because you've what's the word I'm looking for? You've cut out for your other sources of income, basically. There's other potential situations that.
Well, I mean, that's again why I was saying earlier about if you only have one crop to feed, even if that was the best crop to grow in your area. Diversification, or not necessarily diversification, but doing other things than to bind onto other utilities for other sources of income, whether that's
multiple streams of income,
second job, different education system, outputting something else. But again, I don't think people handle and look at this like a 401k, because you don't trade your 401k, you trade options that then benefit maybe your 401k. But
yeah, the beauty of the opportunity comes from that a majority of the users don't understand the system, or they underestimate the system's capacity. So this guy asked, like, how much more user adoption would Hex need to get back to all-time high? And I'm going to tell you just straight up, it would need 0 more users to get back to all-time high. We just need the big seller bags to leave. That's all. Because there's enough sidelined USDC and DAI to bring the price way over the all-time high currently. Even if most of the ecosystem wanted to sell bits on the way up, it still wouldn't be enough to stop the buy pressure because of how small the liquidity pools are right now. Think of dropping a whale inside of just a small little goldfish pond and what that would do to the water. All the water would fall out of the pond, and then the whale would be sitting there squirming. So the whales aren't going to be able to play in the pond until the pond grows. So we're growing the pond right now into an ocean.
It reminds me of something I learned watching your friend Somi. I was watching his stuff a lot, and basically he said, bottoms are made by sellers stopping by running out of sellers, and then tops are made of running out of buyers. So like each way, like going down, the only thing that really matters is how much selling you have in a lot of ways, and going up, the thing that matters the most is how many buyers you have, which was a cool way of looking at it.
One more question before we pull up your slides there, Sloth. It says, I'm a noob to Hex, been DCAing at the 3.1 cent level. Did Richard design this coin to be more than a one-trick pony, aka all-time high, 1 times price appreciation, but to over time make massive gains? So if I'm reading your question properly, I think the quickest way to answer that is that Hex is way more. It's got so many tricks up its sleeve. It's not even funny. There's like so many bonuses and pumpamentals built into it, and then other creators came and built other stuff on top to help price go up faster too. And this is just this downward pressure for 500 days was just a function of people that sold at, here, let me put it another way. People that sold at 1.7 cents still made hundreds of times their original investment. And so that it just means that people were able to sell in profit from 56 cents all the way down to 1.5 cents, and then they still are in profit if they have any left. And so what this does is it creates a floor. But yeah, you guys have anything else to add?
Yeah, there's something I wanted to say. Well, so speaking in terms of like the potential of Hex, I think framing it in terms of like the base tokenomics or the base fundamentals of like what it does. It's like, you know, you can't control whether or not people buy, but you can control via the code, maybe siphoning off different ways for people to use their coins instead of selling. And so for Hex, it's specifically staking. And so the staking mechanism, you know, siphons off coins, punts that sell pressure off into the future. But as time goes on, because the T-share rate's always going up, it takes more and more Hex to get the same amount of inflation over time. So there's more and more Hex being punted out into the future, decreasing the sell pressure over time, theoretically. And essentially, that's a system designed to produce liquidity squeezes, not liquidity squeezes. What's the word I'm looking for? Supply shocks. It's designed to create supply shocks over time until more of it re-enters the system through people unstaking, or the price just goes so high up that people start emergency end staking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like I'll take that a little step further. So system design is just one system. Systemic design is multiple systems in play at the same time based around the same epicenter or gravity or black hole. Most people assume staking have one tool, earn something for something. This one has a lot more mechanics, if you will, or fundamentals or different angles to anchor into the actual trainable utility, which is the people. The system can't be corrupted, but the people can, or be diluted, or be not educated onto how to use the tools the way they're supposed to be used. The inherent ability of the T-share is using multiple different tiers to use a particular use case, which is earning yield, which is different than just I stake ETH and get ETH back.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many good questions, you guys. Yeah. I don't want to keep Sloth waiting.
No, that's all right. Yeah. So I just yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just drew up a couple slides. Every once in a while, I take a look at like the HSI auction house, the health of the system, and I figured this was a good time to kind of share that data because it's been a while since I did it last time on my stream. So yeah. Everything I'm getting pretty much is just from the website, app.icosa.pro, as well as hexmodel.com. And so first, let's see where we at. Okay, so this is basically looking at the volume in terms of number of HSIs as well as number of T-shares that are currently in the HSI liquidation auction. So here we see that we have 4,246 HSIs that are still sitting in backlog. And I did a public stream like 2-3 months ago maybe, and this number has not decreased pretty much at all. So we have this huge backlog of HSIs that are just sitting there waiting to be started, the liquidations that are waiting to be started. And if we look as of right now, I picked this number up a couple hours ago, we only have 22 HSIs currently active on the liquidation auction. So if we just like, you know, if it's like we only have like 22 or 10 to 22 a day, you know, that's like, you know, was it 10, 100, 200 days to work through all of these. So we have, you know, 100 to 200 days of HSIs. If we only had the HSIs currently in backlog, it would take like 50 to 200 days to get through all of them if we're going at this specific rate right here, which could change. That's important because the longer we have HSIs in the system, the more robust our Icosa yield is from our Hedron and Icosa stakes, as well as the it's the length of time by which we can expect Hedron to continue to burn, and that increases its disinflationary mechanisms. So that's good. I say the bigger the backlog, the healthier the system, because that's the further out we can project the amount of volume we're going to have or the amount of activity we're going to have on the liquidation auction. Now, I took a screenshot of the number of T-shares that are going to be started or the number of T-shares in this case when they were sold to the liquidation. No, this one's when they come alive. So yeah, this right here is the number of T-shares that will be available on the liquidation auction at this specific day. And the reason why I wrote day 1, round 2 is because these are the bulk of the HSIs that were recycled the first couple of days of when most of the HSIs went live. So like the first day of Icosa, people sold a bunch of HSIs to get Icosa. 90 days later, those all got on the liquidation auction. People bid for them, won them by burning their Hedron, and then resold them back because the amount of Icosa that they got was more than the amount of the bid, more than the bid that they placed via the bid that they placed in Hedron terms. And so we got a bunch of recycling on that first couple of days. And so because they recycled, they got that Icosa, the HSIs 90 days later, which is February 12th. So in about, 7 days, a week from now, we're going to see a lot of these HSIs come back on the liquidation auction. So this is why it's like day 1, round 2. This is the reverberation from the initial launch of Icosa. We're still seeing this technically 180 days later. So, we have 6.5 T-shares here, 1.9, almost 1,000 here, 2.3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days, about a week. We're having 500 to 6,000 T-shares coming live to be bid on every single day in that 8-day period. And we also have a big backlog here. So that's really healthy in my opinion. Lots more Hedron to be burned, lots more Icosa yield to be earned. We got a question here. How many T-shares is a billion Hedron? 10?
So I got a USD price of 21.50.
21.50.
So let's see what for a billion Hedron. So if you were gonna go buy off market for like a day, it would be what's the price right now? Like $700 maybe.
Per T-share, yeah.
Per T-share roughly.
Yeah.
$700 or $800. So you maybe get 3, and then close to 10 for a 15-year stake, roughly.
Yep.
And then I think the peak point to also bring up here, so that for anybody that has just no clue what the hell Sloth's talking about, like why does this matter? Well, it matters because people are getting T-shares for like 30% off or 50% off because they're using Hedron to buy T-shares, and because Hedron's so undervalued right now, you're able to buy Hedron off market at this cheap price and then go ahead and sacrifice it, burn it out of the supply to get T-shares at a huge discount if you win the auction.
And let me put it this way. I just ran the numbers, and I think this is true. But you would need, is that a billion? Yeah, I think you would need 180 T-shares, and you would need to serve those 180 T-shares for 15 years to get a billion Hedron. Yeah. Mintable Hedron.
That's a super important point of all this, is that reinforces why Hedron will be so rare in the future, and it is for the fact that the only reason why the price has performed the way it has and has had such volatility is a function of the minting bonuses. That's really what has jump started this system and given so much opportunity to X stakers through the Hedron's protocol. So effectively, like if you go again, like Sloth just said, if you go stake, what was it? Do you want to hit those numbers again for me quick?
You need 180 T-shares without any minting bonus. You need 180 T-shares. You need to have them out for 15 years, the max, and serve that entire length of time to mint 1 billion Hedron.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's wild. Like, I want to say that's like $70,000 or $80,000 worth of T-shares, roughly, just to get a billion Hedron. So like versus buying the billion Hedron off market, which is like I just said, it was like $2,500 or what was it, $2,100.
Yeah.
So does that make sense? How like if you could buy a billion Hedron today for 2,100, or stake to get a billion, or you'd be waiting 15 years to get that, and you'd be needing 70 grand. So it shows how undervalued Hedron really is.
Well, they're also in multiple closed loop systems that work and balance each other. I'll always talk about how anchoring into many different places, kind of like AXiS. My favorite quote you ever said is having T-shares on two chains is like having two different suns. Making gravity around each other. And so what Icosa and Hedron do together is basically anchor and support on so many different tiers, and that allows opportunity for those things to spin up, because as you're scripting and building onto that ecosystem. It's making almost like a Voltron type thing, different units coming together that perpetually move the system faster and support it in many different ways.
Yep. And I think an important point on that too is the reason why like that number that I calculated quickly like is so jarring to me isn't just because the amount of money it takes to get those 180 T-shares, but it's how long you need to lock that money up to even mint all of that Hedron in the first place. So another way you can frame the numbers that I just calculated, 180 T-shares for 15 years gets you 1 billion Hedron in 15 years, is that I can buy the equivalent of 180 T-shares that have served 15 years of time today for $2,100, right? So like I can put $2,000 of economic energy into the market today to get the equivalent of what $70,000 in HEX would get me in 15 years. And this is basically the heuristics that I was using initially before Icosa even came out to justify how much Hedron to purchase when you had the maximum amount of risk because of the centralization of supply. Because I'm like, oh my God, like I know that there are all these 10x bonuses, but like I can get like 1 billion Hedron is a lot of Hedron. And if I can just lock that in, put it away, then like I've secured this number of T-shares or this amount of exposure to the T-share that I can't get via the normal route, which is buying and staking HEX.
And then take that one step further. If you take the discount that a future T-share will have on a 5555 stake to Icosa, then you know that you're going to get a discount in the future that rolls onto time served into a T-share on a 15-year stake due to that circular loop that binds it on top of itself. So by having that Hedron, it gets you a press pass to later on down the road when it'll be harder to buy those discounted HSIs, which then reinforces its own system.
Yep. And then this just gets amplified with price going up and the T-share rate going up too. Like the delta, this crazy delta that we just described now only is getting worse over time. Is only getting, let's not use
margins are getting squeezed just like any efficient system. Yes.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, back to the slide. Let's see. So where were we at? Here, this is like, the reverberation of the day one, the launch of Icosa. And then this is like the furthest out we can project based on the number of HSIs that have already been sold to the Icosa contract. And you're seeing even in April, we're still getting 3-digit T-share days of, HSIs coming out. So like, in my opinion, this is actually better than like my wildest dreams in when Hedron first launched. I think the system, the liquidation auction is like fat, full, and we can project up all the way until April. And because of this backlog, I'd say we can conservatively double that timeline. 180 days, 6 months into the future, I feel confident in saying we're going to have substantial HSIs coming up to be bid on to burn Hedron every single day.
Then between two chains as well, when that actually happens, you'll have that ARB in between both of those, which even gets some even crazier on that what happened.
Yep. And so anybody who was paying attention to Alex's tweets as well as in the Icosa chats and everything, you knew that about on January 22nd, a big whale basically flushed through. This is a rough calculation, so I might be off by 5-10% or whatever, but it's like about 6,000 T-shares they put through on a single day, about 52 million HEX. And they generated 1.3 million Icosa from sending all of those HSIs through the liquidation auction. And they sold over 300. And so they staked all of this Icosa too. So we just got a basically liquidity injection of 6,000 T-shares on a single day, independent of the reverberations of day one of Icosa launch. And the cool thing is that a lot of these were siphoned off into individual HSIs of about 20. I believe this is about 25, and this is like 50 T-share stakes. So what that means is that the competition for each of these HSIs goes up because more people have enough Hedron to reasonably bid on these stakes, which means more people are going to be competing for them, which means the delta between the underlying value of the HSI and the bid of the Hedron is going to close because there's more competition for it, which net-wise means more Hedron is burned. Versus if you just put 6,000 T-shares into one HSI, sent it off, only maybe you could probably count on your hands the number of people who have enough Hedron to reasonably bid on that, even at like a 90% discount. So what this actor did was basically divvied up their Hedron, their hex, so that more people can get access to it, burning more Hedron and giving us all more Icosa yield. So this was a pretty significant event because this is essentially a benevolent whale getting an Icosa position and getting it in a way that benefits the entire system.
I think that's why the difference is we actually have smart whales in our community. I mean, granted, some of them that can remove things, and that's fine. People can do their money on how they want to, but setting this up, even like God will, unstaking every 45 days to hammer the T-share rate, doing something like this, that yes, he's going to pay a lot of gas to do this kind of a thing, but he puts it into bite-sized chunks that people in the future will be able to afford, use, and do. That's a smart way of setting up your lanes to actually put your traffic through.
Yeah, and then let me bring up the liquidity pool for Icosa, because this is important. This is an important dynamic to understand in terms of like why the HSI buyback formula is pretty important. And this is something I talked about with Gifford on my stream a couple days ago. And so if you see here, there is 141,000 USDC sitting in the liquidity pool and only 61,000 Icosa available to be purchased. And all of this is USDC. All of this is Icosa. And you see the amount of Icosa available for sale is not very high. And if you look, I'll show these numbers later, but there's only about, in total, between the staked Icosa and the staked and the unstaked or liquid Icosa, there's 32 million tokens total. 30 million of those are staked and 2 million of them are liquid. So the amount of Icosa that's actually available to be purchased is very, very, very low. So anybody who wants to get a position in Icosa now, like with like the size that we're talking about with this guy, you can't get it on the market. Like technically, if we're under the ceiling price, he could buy all of this stuff up. Just because anything you buy under the ceiling price is technically a deal if you're going to run through everything through the ceiling price, through the HSI buyback function anyways. But I think this is such a little amount compared to 1.3 million. It just wasn't worth incurring that slippage. It's basically a rounding area for this kind of size. But what that means is right now, until we start getting a lot of those large Icosa and Hedron stakes ending to provide the Icosa to be able to even put up for liquidity to sell, the HSI buyback formula, the HSI buyback function is the way you get your Icosa position, which is fueling the Hedron burning as well as fueling the yield that supports the entire system from the base, from its base. So that's an important dynamic just to bring up, that the low liquidity of Icosa is preventing people from market buying, which forces large bags that want a position to give up hex and lock it up for the max length of time to get into this kind of token.
Yep. You said that there's 30 million locked up staked right now for Icosa?
Yeah. Let me see.
Okay, and then if I look at I'm looking at Etherscan right now, yeah, I see exactly 2 million Icosa liquid right now. There's just nothing out there.
There is a narrative out of Icosa that is like, hyperinflationary token that you just get tons and tons and tons of it, and it's not really that valuable. But through this analysis, it's actually a pretty rare token,
and it's because it only comes into existence from HSI and Hedron burns.
Right. So hex is proof of weight, right? Because you have to leverage your time. Hedron is proof of B share, as Koolaid likes to say. Icosa is proof of burnt B shares. So B shares that have been burned out 15 years or like have been burned because Hedron has to be burned in order to get it. Like
compound burning. You heard it here first, folks.
Compound burning. Yep. Because like Hedron so it's like you have to give up a T share, the B shares, to be able to get Icosa. And 90 days later, that results in Hedron being burned. So even to mint it today, eventually that's going to lead to Hedron burning. And then that Hedron burn generates more Icosa. So it's like, compound burning. The first iteration generates it. And then the second iteration through the burning generates it as well. So it's still, the rarity is still attached to the T-share pretty intimately, even though via the mechanics, it seems like it's pretty far removed. Okay. Yeah.
How much Icosa do you need?
As much
Pretty
as you
curious.
can get. As much as you can get.
He says, how much Icosa do you need to stake to make you a whale? Well, that's a good time to bring up iShares, huh?
That is a good question to bring up iShares. Let's see. And those are my next slides, actually, funny enough. But if we look just at hexmodel.com, great website by Dev Huey. Like, I pull a lot of the data from him. If we look here, let's pull it up. To be a whale in Icosa, you need to stake at least 20,000. Which that's relative to the 2 million that are liquid on the market, not the 32 million. So you would actually need 320,000 Icosa to have 1% of all the Icosa that exists. But because the amount that's staked does not count, the amount that staked does not count towards your minimum stake length. To be a staking whale, you need at least to get a whale-sized minimum stake, you would trigger that at 20,000 Icosa.
Okay. So just so you know, 320,000 Icosa is roughly 260 grand. And if you tried to make a market buy on that, you'd totally screw up the Icosa USDC chart.
Hey, you'd leave a fun mark though. You know, you'd have a wick named after you. We know that. We've already seen that once on the Hedron chart. Maybe we can get the reverse on the Icosa chart.
Yeah, that's funny. Oh my!
Because they are a chiral system. It is a chiral system, right? So we would want the equal but opposite in
reaction.
Reverse. Yeah. It works. It's all mathematical.
I'm sure, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be, especially if Hex gets super bullish. You know.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it means it's going to happen because one's going to chase the other, and since they're all interlocking, if you understand that, which is the fortunate part, that we can actually look into the system, cross-section it out, and see how it all works together versus everyone else is just throwing money at or darts at a wall and really don't even want to take the time to actually figure the stuff out.
Yeah. But hey, that gives us stuff to talk about, right? At least it's plenty to talk about and plenty to understand.
And it's only going to get more complex than here because now that we see that we can bind onto something that's already complex, you can add other complexities to it and just ballast the ship in different directions. You know, a nuclear reactor is just a steam engine. It's just a very complex one.
Yeah. And like, you know, that's the big innovation of the HSI that we haven't seen come to fruition yet. Because, you know, the HSI is a wrapper of a hex stake, but then you can wrap the HSI into an NFT, and that's basically the portal into the rest of DeFi, right? Like, so the ability to plug and play with hex stakes is now only limited by our imagination in terms of how we can utilize it to fuel whatever systems that we want. And if the T-share is the sun of like basically infinite economic energy, we essentially have the ability to fuel anything that we want economically within the blockchain space.
Think about like making a Dyson sphere. You're actually putting components around the sun and actually building to collect the mass amount of value to that system instead of just one solar panel way back in one single unit vector.
Yep.
The easiest 100%. Way to think about all this is just take a step back is what gives Hex the ability to pump as hard as it does is two variables. One is the low liquidity, but second is stakes that are locked up for a very long time into the future. What this system does is it incentivizes people to lock stuff up longer in the future, but still be able to use it in some way and value extract from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. All right. So system iShares versus system T-shares. These are some ratios that I've been playing around with since I coined the term iShares, which is basically just valuating Icosa in terms of T-shares. So if you go to my the first episode of Pure Alpha, I go through all the math for this. But really quickly, if you just take a certain amount of Icosa, divide it by the HSI buyback rate in terms of hex for Icosa, you get the output is denominated in T-shares. So you're able to denominate any amount of Icosa in T-share terms, which for systems that are built on top of the T-share is a pretty important metric to keep and use for contextualization. And so what I'm doing here is I'm basically taking the entirety of the Icosa system, all of the coins that exist, valuing it in terms of T-shares. specifically 5555 T-shares, and comparing it to how many T-shares exist in Hex currently. And you get some really weird numbers. And I'm bringing this up not because I know what it means, but because I think I need help understanding what this means. I'm still trying to, and actually, this is really good that we have Koolaid up here, because he always talks about Hedron and really Icosa being a shadow of a T-share, and that it needs that same amount of time from its inception, from its inception to like when T-shares existed, when it was created. It needs that same amount of time to realize that same amount of value, which is about 2 years. And so what we have here is basically, in a weird way, a way to measure that shadow, in that maybe we're valuing Icosa in terms of iShares, which is valuated in terms of T-shares, and seeing that how that relates to the current system, that the current state of the Hex system, in the current state of how many T-shares exist in the Hex system. Sorry. And so basically, here's the math: 2 million liquid Icosa, 30 million staked. And so that gives us 134,561 iShares, which means in the total Icosa system, we only have a value of 134,000 T-shares, basically. And if you look at the total T-shares that exist, it's 10 million. That's AXiS. Remember when I was DMing you about this? And you're like, what does that mean? I don't know. Were you confused about what I was saying, or like you just don't understand why there's this big discrepancy?
I was just blown away by your brilliance.
I appreciate it. But like, yeah, I don't know what this means to basically be, 100 times less T-share. The Icosa system has 100 times less T-shares than the number of T-shares that exist. I don't. Yeah, go ahead, Koolaid. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't do math. I'm just trying to like run the nodes in my head. So if we looked at liquid 2 to stake 3, so I think the first thing that would have to happen is when we originally had the Icosa launch, there's a 20% whale bonus. That's basically the whole rounding error when Alex was trying to front run what big actors would do. But since everyone staked at once, we didn't have the idea of rolling those separate lower bags. So that way you can unstake, get, unstake, get. We're in this nebulous time that most of that first month's work is now locked for that full year period. And then once you have that, think about, like, again, I talk about it being an engine, the T-share engine, the Hedron engine, and the Icosa that puts wheels on that T-share train. I think that will expand the liquidity pool. That will allow a lot more things now to happen and give people options. But during that 1 year vesting and 1 year waiting time, the Hedron train will have been moving, and then the T-share train will have been moving faster and faster. So as you see that first unlock set, then we're going to see the next, say, level up of monsters or more complexity of things that can then happen, because then you'll have more Icosa available. But will they want, if they finally now got that unlocked Icosa, right? They staked it. Now they get all that Hedron yield, and then they can take that Icosa now shatter their wallets more to have more now yield-bearing tires on the engine. So maybe they won't sell it because now they're seeing the value. And if that's truly the case, and let's say we have another 180 days till that date happens or whatever it is. Let's just say another, let's say 3/4 of a year. If a T-share is at that next bull run that costs, let's say 10 grand for a T-share again, or something of that nature, and they know that Icosa is the only way that you're going to be able to get Hedron and Icosa to buy those discount HSIs, it may be a different play, because a lot of the people that will own those assets actually understand the utility of said assets. And traders won't have access to that because they didn't stake it in the beginning to begin with because they were traders. So if you think about like how all those can lock into each other, the smarter people will actually have, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. We have the ability for those people that have these assets locked up, that when they get them, to use and drive the system properly if they're trained, if they're talked about, if they watch streams like this. So I think that's where your discrepancy comes from, is that the T-share was created so long ago that will actually exist. The total iShares is based on the state ones, but the staked are now liquid to actually turn over the system to unlock all the ones that is staked.
I think I know what you mean, Koolaid. I think I've got kind of a concept of what you're trying to say too.
Sure.
I think like the way that that I visualize it in my mind right now is just simply by the U.S. dollar value of Hedron, but because it's so severely undervalued, like I would measure total T shares in USDC or U.S. dollar terms, and I just think that if you just simply put that if 10.3 million T shares is variable X, then Hedron is like 92 to 95% lesser value than what it's supposed to be to meet X at parity, so to speak. So because of that, you're just not seeing that realized valuation in dollar terms because of what Kool-Aid's saying, which is this ratcheting effect of that stuff, that the majority of it's being locked up and not creating more circulating supply till that first year's up. So that makes sense to me, that it's all just kind of like a lagging. It's like at the back of the train, so to speak, right now, and in a year, everything should start to like level out.
Yeah. Well, so the thing I was contemplating is like, as this delta closes, what does that mean? Like, what is happening for this delta to close? And essentially, it's more Icosa needs to be printed.
Yep.
Right. So like more Icosa needs to come into existence in order for this discrepancy to close. Now you can interpret that as bad because more inflation equals more sell pressure, but like also it's like who's getting that inflation? It's people who are staked and people who are.
And I don't think it should be interpreted as bad either. I think it should be interpreted as less Hedron supply. So Hedron's getting deflated while that deflation then converts into another asset called Icosa.
Yep.
It's still the same economic energy, just transmuting into another ticker.
Yep. And so, and then these are all the things I'm just trying to work through in my head on like what this actually means. The flip side, and another thing to consider here, is that T shares are deflationary now, and that we're getting less and less T shares existing over time. But the total I shares is always going to go up, independent of whether or not more Icosa comes into existence, because the rate of the price of Icosa in terms of hex is always getting more expensive. So Icosa via that HSI buyback formula is always more expensive in hex terms because of the way the T-share rate is worked into that equation. And so so what we have a situation here is that the total T-shares are going down, but the total I shares is always going to go up. So what happens when this ratio flips and that there are now more I shares than there are T shares? I don't know what that means quite yet, but
yeah, it translates to massive dollar appreciation across the whole ecosystem. That's where it balances out, is that these systems are globally deflationary relative to the U.S. dollar, and so that the whole system rises. Even though there might be more I shares and T shares at some point, the dollar valuation of everything is going to be, you're going to need way more dollars to accumulate those things, even because it's all about the inflation rate and the growth rate of, it's still going to be lesser than the inflation of U.S. dollars. That's what you're competing against in this case.
So basically, another way of saying that is this could potentially be an indicator where as we close this delta, more and more and more, the probability for price appreciation increasing.
Yep, it has to.
Yep.
As a function of rarity and De Beers.
Yes,
well, I asked that question for a very specific reason, because I also did this with Hedron, and look at the difference here if we value Hedron in terms of T shares, which for this one, each a single T share prints 5.5 million Hedron in a whole year. So it's like the max stake length is 5555. One T share is 1,000 B shares. 1,000 times 5,555 is 5,555,000. So if you take your amount of Hedron, divide it by 5,555,000, then you get your valuation of your Hedron in terms of T shares, or like max length T shares, which is the same as I shares. So that's what the H shares are. And if we do that, we see that we have 20 million. We almost have 2x the number of H shares that exist in terms of T shares. So that's really interesting. That for Icosa, we're like way under, but we've already doubled it in terms of Hedron.
Well, it's also time served.
Yep. Yep. And I also just took
Yeah,
the
doesn't that
numbers.
mean, isn't that because the H shares is technically Hedron going back since the beginning of Hex?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Plus,
Because all of it,
plus the minting bonus, which throws
plus
a
the
whole
minting.
other. So it should be
And
2 million if you took away all the minting bonus, right?
well, so the minting bonus, a big part of it was because that there were 2 years of T shares that started and ended before Hedron existed. And so I think Alex kind of calculated it out based on modeling how many people might participate to get the launch phase bonuses to capture the T shares that used to exist before Hedron existed. So it's basically a way of saying, like, you know what, the people who weren't here, the stakes that ended, there's no way to go back and get them. Let's give it to the people that are here now. So it's actually a rough estimation of how many B shares have actually existed in the system for the day served.
So
I
then
took
does,
the SA out.
yeah.
Just real quick, I took the SA out because it gets a copy of all the 10x bonuses. So that's like a little bit of like of all the launch phase bonuses. So if I mint 1 million Icosa, 1 million Hedron, and like 900,000 of that was because I had a 10x bonus, then the SA also gets 900,000. So that's like a little extra inflation that's given to like this entity that is a little more diluted relative to the number of B shares that exist. So just for the sake of just taking that number out, it's about 11 million compared to the 10 million T shares.
Interesting. So yeah, then that calculation works out.
Yep.
To me, because we were just at 11.3 million T shares just a year ago.
Yep. And yeah. So there we go. So this is tracking that total valuation pretty well.
So then there's this inflection point coming where instead of total H shares always going up, where total H shares begins to go down. And that's when minting bonuses start to disappear and when increasingly more Hedron gets burned and all of that economic energy that goes missing from the Hedron side of the equation goes then into the Icosa side of the equation.
Correct.
Yep. So we have two things that we can track now, I guess. This would be good to put on my website. The delta between I shares and total T shares, and using that as a potential indicator on when we might see more volatility, and then the inflection point on whenever H shares start to flip over to deflationary.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's
new
what I got.
Thank you.
Hope that made sense.
I had somebody that wanted me to run some Fibonacci analysis on some of these things.
Let's do it.
It's kind of funny that I'm doing technical analysis on this stuff because, you know, after you just saw the tokenomics, you can pretty much anticipate where this stuff is going to go anyway. But in the short term, yeah, this might be the only time you'd want to see this stuff. So here's Hedron. I got a fib level. This is called a Fibonacci retracement tool. I basically take the local high to the local low. This local low coincided with the OA wall, which is now acting as support. And now you can see here from the top of that capitulation candle, we are literally trading right at the top of the ascending channel here, and that we wicked through and we actually hit the 50% fib level here, but then we went back down into the channel, and that actually is a perfect parallel line with on the bottom with the base that we formed. So now you're trending in a channel. If Hex goes sideways for 3 weeks, you could maybe expect Hedron to pull back into that midline. If Hex goes vertical in the coming days, you could see this thing just bust out the top, and then like I think it's targeting the 618. But as you'll see on Icosa, if Icosa is a leading indicator due to its rarity, Icosa already actually almost met and exceeded its target here of the 786, which is actually like in equivalent terms, Hedron's here in its retracement, so it's like paused at that level. So if Icosa is the leading indicator, it's already went and almost met, which was the ceiling price at 3.2 cent hex, roughly around that $1.03 to $1.13. And so I think, you know, this is just a typical pullback. You're going to come back and you're going to test the moving averages, same as Hex. You're going to come back and test these moving averages, same as Hedron. You're all going to kind of come back and test these lower moving averages, but what you want to see is support form in the coming days on all those levels, and then you can come up and try to like meet and exceed that 618 target on Hedron. And remember, this stuff's like extremely undervalued right now, so this is really good performance. off the bottom. I think roughly this was 154%, but currently you're at 100% gain. And so I think just trying to hold those gains is going to be good for the system.
Mm-hmm. Definitely good for our bags.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The other thing too is like with Icosa is here on the RSI, see here, you basically did a double top here, but in RSI terms, Hex historically and now Hedron too have made their way all the way up into this like 95 range before they finally top. So Icosa still, even though it's performed so well, it's just so rare. And I think what that benevolent actor in the Icosa system did was by splitting up and making those HSIs more competitive, he's given people a reason to come back in and become buyers of Hedron, which should push Hedron prices higher, but which should help Icosa. The whole system is going to move together, I think, without going too far into it. But just we're basically waiting on Hex to make its next move. So until you break that parabola on the RSI, this is still a bullish trend. And sometimes you'll see this thing where like you meet previous target on the RSI, like here, you'll meet it again, maybe go slightly over, you'll come back in and you'll come back to test these mid bands. So that's perfectly fine and that's still healthy too. The one thing you don't want to see on these assets is to come and break below, back down into here. Not holding this mid band would be detrimental to the price for a few months, but that's not really the stage of the market we're in, because we're currently in like a Hex run up where it's just reverting back to the mean. The way I can show you that is by basically drawing out just a simple trend line from the bottom on this basic trend here. Like we're still good as long as we can hold this trend, which means you could go sideways now for quite some time through here and just come and then slowly start to round out and then make our way higher. And that only puts you out till the beginning of March. Now Godwill's stake or that big bow wave or whatever's coming out on the 13th and 14th, there's like 2-point-some billion Hex coming out there somewhere in here.
Is that Godwill's stake? Is that his stake?
I thought that was one of his stakes. Yes, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, one day it did for 45 days. If my idea of what he's going to try to do and just hammer the T-share rate every time, that reflexively will echo through all the other chambers.
Let's show them. Let's show them. We got to figure out the dollar change and what it means for the system, because this will kind of help people visualize what's going on here. Shit, how do I zoom in?
I think there's a scrolly bar.
So basically, this major jump here is 25,800 to 26,500. So what is that in Hex terms? Like 800 Hex in a day? So that means that whatever 800 Hex is at this price. So let's say, let's do some math. Hex.
Let's just say, how many times can you do that every 45 days in a month?
800. Yeah, you find that out. So it's $30. So at this price, it's a $30. He's going to increase the price of a T-share by $30 every time he does that at current prices. If Hex price doubles, now all of a sudden it's $60 increase. If Hex price triples, now all of a sudden it's a $90 increase. Well, T-shares are...
It's an $800 increase.
What's that?
No, let's not look at dollars, though. Let's look at if he does that every 45 days, so there's 8 punches that he can do every year. And if you said there's 800 Hex increased every punch, so 800 times 8.1 is 6,488 more Hex per T-share, which is almost what Big Payday was when it took us from 13 or 14 or whatever it was up to 18.
Yeah, that's a lot. A 6,400 Hex increase in the T-share rate equates to $250 current prices. And so like every time that he is ratcheting and compounding the share rate against you, as well as the market gets more bullish, price goes up, which makes this price in dollar terms compound against you. So what he's basically doing a squeeze on the price of T-shares by ratcheting up the share rate at a faster rate. Now that's if he does 45-day stakes every time.
Yep.
Which I would hope that he would be thinking that way right now, because a lot of the big sellers are out, and that's actually good for the ecosystem, and it would incentivize.
1,000%.
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah. And he won't be alone, because the next group of entrepreneurs that comes in and tries to scoop up a ton of hex at the lows, anywhere under 10 cents and has the same methodology, they're going to be working in unison. And I think the next big bull run, the big thing that's going to make this bull run different is big players' power to ratchet up the share rate faster against the bow wave class of users that just sells interest on a monthly or 45-day period.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that's the interesting thing about how orcas can do everything themselves, right? An orca can go toe to toe against a shark, but the difference is they move in packs, and so that kind of tenement for larger players to see how the system works instead of moving just in a solo system, they can either move against that system if they see opportunity, but when many different people of same metric weight of wallet are going in that way and it helps support the system, they have no choice because someone else is going to scoop that right back up.
I agree. I think this is good. This is
And
all
all
good.
that-
He earned all that power in the
And you
system.
can-
I mean, that he should be using it for the good of the system.
Yeah, and you don't even have to interpret it through a benevolent actor lens. You can do it through purely through a selfish reasoning, which is he has all this money sitting on the sidelines, not being productive. If he has no plans to sell it, which is his typical MO, he might as well be compounding his coins on the way while maintaining like relative liquidity, right? So he doesn't even need to be caring about the system's health or like making it more expensive or price going up, which would also be in his interest.
Yeah.
But like he's just doing it because he's just making money. Like he's putting to work money that he already has, and he's just getting more because why wouldn't you?
I mean, let's take it one step further. He made all that money in ETH by doing nothing. This, at least he has something to do.
Yeah.
At least he's actually pressing a button that says, I'm going to make more money now. And I have something to do. It's great.
Yeah, and that's an interesting dynamic that I at least haven't heard talked a lot about in like hex streams and stuff, and that's the dynamic between long-term stakers and short-term stakers. I think it's touched on a bit, but like long-term stakers are the people who capture the value over the long term, but the short-term stakers are the people who are like giving value to the system or working the system to be able for that value to be realized in the future. So it's like, yeah, short-term staking is like, kind of frowned upon, but at the same time, we need that. We don't need that, but like, it's very helpful to have that because it's ratcheting the T-share rate up even faster. And you can even frame it in another way where the contract is paying people to develop the T-share rate over time. Like the contract pays you to increase the T-share rate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like it. Got any questions in the chat, guys? Just feel free to add them in here. I might have forgot some. I'm going to kind of go back and look through here in a second. I just updated the liquidity page, so we're sitting at about 95 million hex in the pools, and the USDC is down from 3.2 million to 2.86 million, so about 400 grand has been siphoned out, and then that translated to this price move here, which was roughly 4% down on price. And I think like we'll meet some kind of equilibrium over the next week or two as we go into this vertical line, which is that Godwheel end stake, which is the ratcheting up of the T-share rate.
Mm-hmm.
So I think all this will kind of meet, somewhere down in here. Technically, if we can get a burst of liquidity here soon, we can create some sort of a bull flag structure, and then come back up and test, and then start to make structure higher. And one of the reasons why I think that that's a possibility is when I look at Bitcoin. Here, gotta zoom in. So this is what I've been seeing in the Bitcoin chart. You're basically looking at, let's get you guys some scaling in here. Okay. So I got two fractals overlaid. It looks messy, but right now, currently Bitcoin's testing this lower bound. So let me go ahead and delete these out so you can see. We're testing the lower bound of this upper channel right now on Bitcoin, but it is a weekend, it is a Sunday, and typically Sundays and Saturdays aren't that good for price action in crypto, and like they'll do the opposite of the trend. Just something that happens because volume slows down during the weekends. So that's just like a known fact about crypto. What you're doing is you're getting that key test of this level. Now, if you want the chart to remain bullish, you want to bounce. You have bounce off this level on Bitcoin, but a bearish move would be to come down, test, and then go down to here. And then a super bearish thing would be to come up and set up a head and shoulders pattern, which would end up crashing down like this. which is just exactly what happened back here in this yellow fractal. This yellow fractal was the 2020 DeFi summer top, where the price ran up to $12,500, peaked, and then sold off hard. And then you got that head and shoulders pattern. It looks like this, where you get the left shoulder, the head, and the right shoulder. Break of that line there back down for an automatic. I was actually leverage trading this trade, so I remember this very, very well. Because I was actually long going into this.
Do you remember? I was about to say, do you remember it fondly, or do you remember it for losing money?
So I was long going into this move on a couple
Nice.
$100, and then it went against me. I closed, and then I went short and caught. I actually went short somewhere in here because this was so fast down. I was working at Costco at the time. I think I went short like probably somewhere in here, and like on 100x leverage, and it's just like automatic money. I was watching the thing go like plus 100, 800 ROI, down 200 ROI, up 800 ROI. It was like this volatility in here. But,
gosh.
But it was fun.
And that and then going to work at Costco with all that in the back of your head.
Yeah. It's like, how am I supposed to do anything? I can't stock right now. I have my phone in my hand the whole time. I'm like, yeah, dude, I just made $800. Like,
oh my God.
So this would be one outcome, right? Is where Bitcoin comes down here and breaks, and goes down to retest these this to make a higher low. So this is a low. This would be a higher low, and that would actually see bullish continuation. Even though this whole thing would be short-term bearish, this is how it ends up. Is you actually go make a new high of $28,000 sometime in March. And so, well, the question would be then, okay, is that the pattern we're gonna get, or are we gonna get a pattern more like this one here, which was the 2018 bottom, where we come back down into this bottom channel. Look how perfectly and beautifully it plays with this bottom trend line resistance or support. And so you just come back down into here. You find support here next week, and then the week after that we go up and we just go max pain, leave everybody fully behind. This is the last chance for people to accumulate before the big rip to like $35,000, $36,000, $37,000 per Bitcoin. So then the question we got to ask is, if we're going to get a bullish outcome out of either one of these scenarios, look at them, they're both going up. How is Hex going to act during this time frame? And I think when I look at the Hex chart right now, this whole move here was just too fast and just over performance. This whole thing was just over performance. So all this is just reverting to the mean. And even if it did this, you're still going to just play with that center yellow line, and we're going to still trend up and come fight that big downtrend resistance up here in yellow. So ultimately, what you want to see Hex do here is just stay decorrelated from the rest of the market and hold these levels slowly and just go stablecoin mode, and then start to work its way up, and then this is going into March now out here. By March time, maybe you see Bitcoin start to recover. Like this general time frame is like Valentine's Day, mid-February. This time frame is like 5th, 6th, 7th of March. So between these, on this 30-day time frame, is when you're going to see max volatility in the markets. But we honestly got to say that max pain is to the upside, because everybody who got left behind down here at 15K. And so that's kind of the way I'm looking at the markets right now. In addition to that, I do chart sets on axisALiVE.com. So if you guys are interested in that, please go there and check them out. We're winding down the private Discord with Sloth and Silver and myself at the end of the month. So that'll be done. Silver is going to revamp the channel and come back with that. And as Paul's chain launch approaches, and there's going to be all that excitement and hype, and that's when we really want to bring the maximum value to that group. So in the meantime, obviously go visit Krypto Sloth's website at lookintahedron.com and use all his calculators, and we're going to do our bi-weekly public streams like this with myself and Sloth, and have great guests like Koolaid along for the ride as well. So general market to me is bullish, and maximum pain is to the upside. Hex is just in a retracement pattern right now. I think it looks good. Obviously, if Hex can hold these ranges, that's really good for Icosa Hedron, which is still severely undervalued from its base parity where it should be. So yeah, anything else you guys want to add?
I think we covered a good amount there. I think that was a good hour and a half.
Yeah.
Flew by. You go ahead, Koolaid, if you have anything to say.
No, it was just really great to be on with you guys. Really, really smart times, and it's an exciting time to be alive, to be paying attention to this stuff.
100%.
We got a super good question here, actually.
Right.
Wouldn't gas fees eat up God Whale's interest staking only 45 days? Yeah, right, dude. He's minting thousands of dollars a day. No way, dude.
Oh, no.
It's
That's like
okay. Big misunderstood fact. And I'm not laughing at you. I'm actually laughing with you.
Yeah.
Here, bud.
Yeah, sorry.
Like-
I don't mean to laugh at Barvon Crypto. It's just when you know the God Whale size, it's like funny to think that he would be like pinching pennies on gas fees.
Well, I
Check this
also
out.
commented right underneath it. Anyone that owns a yacht doesn't care about the cost of fuel. If you own a private jet, you know what the cost of using your toy is. He already has so much weight that he's doing more with his weight than not with his weight. But even if you had a yacht docked, it still has maintenance fees, regardless if you put gas into it or not. Just to own the toy requires you to use something to like have the toy.
So if you stake for 45 days and gas is right now 24 gwei, it's going to cost you $5 to end the stake. So if you're making thousands of dollars, if you're going to make a few thousand, like if you're going to make like 50 grand off of staking for 45 days with a few billion hex, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't do it because it's going to cost me $5 to end the stake.
Yeah, dude, fuck that.
Also, with the EVM cost of to unstake, it's time mostly, not the amount of metric weight that you're using to use the system, I believe.
Yeah, so if you staked for 15 years, then it would cost you 0.3 ETH, which that'd be a little more, right? So you're going to want to make sure that if you're staking longer, that you're staking fatter, so that when you go to end your stake in 15 years or 10 years or 8 years, that what's behind the door makes sense to go get.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, we can save some of that stuff for the next one. Some of the gas fee calculations and some of the stuff Alex has been talking about, as well as like maxi stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a good idea. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks
All
for
right.
all coming. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, appreciate you, man. This is a good second episode. Ready for the next one in a couple weeks, man.
All right.
I'm
We'll
liking
see
it.
you guys in 2 weeks. Thanks, Koolaid. Appreciate you guys in the chat. We'll talk to you soon.
Always, bud.
Peace out.